Yeah.
Instagram. Instagram is the slow child of streaming platforms here.
All right, we ready to roll? Okay, so let's try and get back on the train here. Ki Adam Eitz HaSadeh, we're saying that we've now understood that there's 3 levels of this paradigm of Datzcham, Domim, Someach, Chai, Medaber, inanimate, growing, animal, and man. You have in the world at large, which then you have in the man, right? We said like our bones, our growing, our animalistic being, and our intelligence. And then we said even in the intelligence, in that part which makes us Adam, there's also 4 parts, right? And in the intellect, there's the inanimate, the growing, and the animal, and the man in the intellect. And primarily, we said that we're focusing on the Ish and the Adam, which are the 2 parts of the intellect, which are the highest parts. One, the Ish, is the intellect which is relevant to creating emotions, right? That there's an aspect of your mind which is dedicated to promoting your love and fear of Hashem. And then there's the abstract, pure intelligence, which is called the Adam of the Adam. And we said that this is the real question of the Gemara. Ki Adam Eitz HaSadeh. If you would have told me that Ish is the Eitz HaSadeh, in terms of even the intellectual part of man, but the intellect itself, it's primarily there to create emotions. What part of man is that? That's the Ish. But if you're going to tell me the abstract, totally disconnected, disjointed thinking, which has nothing to do with yourself, how is that also called the Eitz HaSadeh? The whole purpose of that is actually to create emotions. That's already something of a stira. So we started to explain by way of analogy of the tree. And let's take it from page 98, right? And we said, the last paragraph on the first column of page 98. Where's your copy? Where's your copy? Copies all around, please. Is there any left? Please pass them around.
I need one.
Here we have here. Last paragraph, page 98 on the right column. Let's take it nice and slow. So he says, Kashem shebe'ilan, ein aperos tzomchim migufo. Page 98, right column, 3rd paragraph down. Just like on a tree, the fruits grow, they do not grow migufo, from the body of the tree, from the trunk. Ubevadai lo mishrasham, also certainly not from the roots, right? Because those aspects of the tree are, so to speak, too high to deal with fruits, right? They're like too many stages away. And this is where we sort of we stopped last time exactly on this line, because I wanted to drop down at footnote 25, and it goes all of a sudden like extremely deep into analogy of the different parts of the tree and their relationship to the fruit. He starts going mamash like into the upper echelons of reality. Let's take a look at footnote 25 for a second. And he says, Ki etzem ha'ilan hu dugmas yesh hamiti. Oh, Mendel's going to love this. The actual tree itself, right, is an example of what we call the yesh hamiti. What's the yesh hamiti? So let's break it down. There's something called the yesh hamiti, the true yesh. And there's something called the yesh hanivra, which is the created yesh. We know what the word yesh means. It means like the thing, something, right? So usually we say the world is created yesh mi'ayin, right? What does that mean? That we, the yesh, are created from nothing. But then that seems to be kind of disparaging for Hashem. We call him nothing, right? Is Hashem nothing? So why do we say that we, the yesh, are coming from nothing? Why do we call it nothing?
Because it's from our perspective, it's nothing.
From our perspective, we have no idea what it is, so we call it nothing. But is it nothing? On the contrary, there's the real yesh is Hashem, right? The only thing that actually exists is Him. Everything else is nothing. So as it turns out, there's really 4 levels involved in this conversation. There's something called the yesh ha'amiti, right? And then that is God's essence. We're calling that, in a certain sense, like the roots or the trunk of the tree. Then you have what's called the ayin of the yesh ha'amiti. What's the ayin of the yesh ha'amiti? So in other words, there's now ayin, which is nothing, which comes from the yesh. Instead of saying that the yesh comes from the ayin, which is what we usually say, that something comes from the nothing, We're now going to say that the nothing comes from the something. What's the first level of nothing that comes from this something?
The light that's nullified to
The Or Ein Sof, which is nullified to the source, right? The Or Ein Sof that comes out of God's essence is called the big nothing, right? Because compared to the true Yesh, which is God himself, that's like nothing. But that nothing is still so high and brilliant that it's still too high to actually make the worlds out of that Or Ein Sof. So the ayin itself, the nothing itself, has to contract itself into a whole nother level of nothing. What is that? What's the contraction of the Or Ein Sof? What'd you say? Okay, yeah, the kav, ak, right? This level of basically a small ray of the Or Ein Sof. That's the second level of nothing. You with me? And then from that nothing, we can create a something, which is you. Right? So that's when we say we're called Yesh Mi'ayin, we're something from nothing, let's put it in perspective. We're something from the nothing which is above us. What's the nothing above us though? Just a tiny ray of the Or Ein Sof. Go into the actual Or Ein Sof, that's also called nothing, compared to the true Yesh, which is Hashem's essence.
Yeah, but shouldn't the second...
Just before we say yeah, but, does everyone follow what I just said? All right, so you have the essence of God, the Or Ein Sof, which is flowing out of the essence of God, then the kav of light from the Or Ein Sof, and then the creation. And the way we sort of name these things, the Yesh Amiti, the true Yesh, which is God, the ayin of the Yesh Amiti, which is what? The Or Ein Sof. Then we have the ayin of the Yesh Hanivra. We have the ayin of the created Yesh, which is what we normally call the ayin, right? Because when we say we're called Yesh Mi'ayin, what do we mean? We're Yesh from not the real ayin, but only the ayin of the Yesh Hanivra, right? The Yesh Hanivra, the created Yesh. So God
is the Yesh,
yeah.
like the original Yesh,
Yeah.
like the source, and
Yeah.
then everything else is basically nothing, but then everything else that comes out of that nothing is another Yesh.
In other words, there's different levels of sort of there's two levels of nothing, there's two levels of Yesh, right? The Yesh Amiti is truly God. There's an experience of that which is just completely negated out of existence, this Or Ein Sof. Then that contracts itself into another nothing, but that nothing is now considered to be the nothing that we are addressing when we say we come from nowhere. Really, we come from a very contracted level, two times contracted level of light. And why do we call ourselves a Yesh Amiti? Because we experience ourselves as something. All right, that's just the background of this conversation. Did you want to ask something?
Yeah, shouldn't the kav, like the second ayin, be a yesh? Because the light's now becoming recognizable, like discernible as like some of visible light, so to speak.
But again, the light itself is not in a position where it's promoting its own self-expression. Light is nullified to its source. Light is shining off and sort of in a state of devekis to wherever it's coming from. So it's the experience of light is just to show its source, right? But if you see light of the moon, it's showing you the moon. You see light of the sun, it's showing this light of a candle. So the whole idea of light is that it's essentially selfless, pointing to where it comes from.
Right, but that's the first ayin. But
That's
then
also the second ayin.
After there's Simpson and it's dark, like, there's a contraction of light. The kav now becomes discernible as singular light.
No, but the Kav's whole business is to say, I'm nothing and I'm joining to something above me. It's true that the thing that it's joining now above is that which is on the other side of the Tzimtzum, which is the Or Ein Sof, but it still has this sort of devekis quality of wanting to get out of itself and be one. Only when that light then actually creates a separate entity, which no longer is called light, right? It's gashmius, it has a feeling of independence, then we can call that a yesh. Yeah.
But then I learned in a Chabad Sefer, one of the previous rebbes, talks about the shattering of the vessels occurred because this light started to, how can I say it, see itself as an individual thing. And then
Okay, you're going too deep, Daniil. You're a deep thinker. We're not shattering any vessels at the moment. We're just bringing this whole thing as a metaphor for a tree. Let's go back inside. I'm serious. Let's go back. The Rebbe, I'm just reading a footnote. I don't want to get too off course. So let's look at footnote 25 now with that background. Etzema ilan hu dugmas yesha amiti. The tree itself is like the true God, right? It's like the Yesh Amiti. V'gam hanafim hamispashtim mimenu. Also the branches, which are then coming out of this trunk, hem dugmas b'chinas ayin shel Yesh Amiti. They're like the first ayin, which is basically something which is expressing itself out of the original essence of the trunk, right? So the branches are the Orein Sof. Rak haprachim hayotzim me'anafim. Then you have the flowers, which then sprout from those branches. They're an example of what? The yesh of the ayin of the yesh hanivra, right? The second ayin. And then from them come out the fruits, which are the yesh hanivra. So what are we trying to say? We're trying to explain how, even though this level of Adam, which is totally beyond anything to do with you and your emotions and nothing to do with man, it's like out there, and in other words, nothing to do with the humanity of the man, the emotions of the man. So nonetheless, we're saying it's the tree of the field. So he's trying to explain now by way of analogy. There's certain parts of a tree which have nothing to do with the fruits, and yet, do they really have nothing to do with the fruits? In other words, they're so far away from the fruits, they're not even a flower, they're not even a branch, they're a trunk, they're roots, they're in no position to have what to do with any fruits, right? There's many stages that have to take place before the concept of fruit ever comes to be, and yet, let's look inside. So in other words, we said, the fruits don't come from the trunk, they come from the flowers that come from the branches. Back inside, right? Nonetheless, it's self-understood. If you want to have fruits, they for sure you still need a trunk and roots, right? Even though the trunk and roots have zero to do with the fruits. In fact, they're so far removed from the fruits that like you need stages and stages to develop, to even give them a connection. Nonetheless, obviously, you need a trunk and roots to get to any fruits. And not only that, but tachlis ha'ilan gufa is the shema perus. The only reason you have a trunk and the only reason you have roots is to get to those perus. Even though they have nothing to do with the fruits, their essential reason for being is those fruits. Shilchein eit she'eino motzi perus. And how do you know? Maybe you'll say, no, I'll just be a trunk. I'll just be roots and I'll be a beautiful big tall tree that doesn't have fruits. You know what the Torah tells you to do with a tree like that? Tashchis v'karata. Cut it down. Right? That's what we say. Go back to the Gemara. If you're not a Talmud Chacham, don't learn from this person. If you don't have fruits, I don't even want your tree. So even though the trunk and the roots have nothing to do with the fruits, if you don't have trunk and roots that are fruit producing at some point, don't talk to me about your trunk and your roots. They're totally unimportant and need to be cut down. Right? Even the roots and the tree have to be cut down if they don't make fruits. So we see here that even something which is totally removed is nonetheless, its very existence is all caught up and bound up with being defined by these fruits that come out later. And so it is with your Adam of your Seichel, right? You're like purely abstract thoughts that you're going to be thinking about Chassidus, and you're out there, right? Someone's going to come and say, Rabbi, what does this have to do with my life? I'm trying to be a good person. I'm trying to be a good husband. You're talking about the Orein Sof and the Ak and the Yesh Amiti, and like where have we gone with this conversation? This has nothing to do with my humanity and my being a good person. She says, no, it actually not. It does, big time. That when it comes to the Adam of the Seichel, right, this highest dimension of the Seichel, even though that aspect of you is too high to be a direct source of any midos, nonetheless, nonetheless, this Adam of the Seichel, it totally has hashpah on the midos. Just like the trunk and the roots, they certainly have hashpah on the fruits. And not only do they have a little bit of hashpah, they're the only reason that you have fruits in the first place. In fact, they have a much more foundational primacy than even the ish of the seichel. Even the part of your intellect which is actually there to get busy making fruits, where would that be if you didn't have roots and a trunk? In other words, it's the essential foundation of ever producing fruits, is that you must first have roots and a trunk, which means that this highfalutin, deep level of thinking is 100% essential for you to ever think you're going to make fruits in your life, right? You can't start having branches and flowers unless you have a trunk.
So we're basically saying that.
One second, just want to finish the sentence before I get lost. And therefore, even though in a direct way it has nothing to do with the midos, the whole purpose of your having that philosophical mind is intrinsically only in order to make midos, in order to make fruits. Yeah.
We're basically saying that every single part of the tree is of equal importance. Because we started off, we're saying, actually, the intellect, the highest point of man, that's the important part. Now we say, no, actually it's the emotions, because the emotions lead the intellect to some feeling towards God, and then that leads to deed. And without the emotions of deed, the intellect doesn't really matter. And now we're saying that, actually the intellect is the most important part, because it's the root of everything. So we're essentially saying that the entire tree is the most important thing, like every single aspect.
Okay, I mean, what we're just trying to point out is, can you turn on the air conditioner? I'm about to melt. There's a tree sap coming out. So we're trying to understand a pasuk at the end of the day. Ki Adam eitz hasadeh, right? We're not necessarily determining what's more important, less important. We're just trying to say, explain to me, please, how this level of Adam is nothing other than a tree. Is man a tree? Right? Man maybe eats from the tree, blah, blah, blah. And then what we're ultimately saying is, if the tree is really its fruits, then yes, ultimately even the roots and the trunk and things which have nothing seemingly to do with the fruits, which is like your pinnacle self, it's only there in order to make fruits. The purpose of your deepest intellect, which is by beferush not a self-help part of your mind, right? There's parts of your mind that are there to develop yourself. I look at this, it doesn't say this here, but it's the difference between the mother and the father, right? We've talked about this before. The mother grows you, right? And even after you come out, she nurses you. And even after you're done nursing, she feeds you and she nurses you and she coddles you and she kisses you. She's very close to you and she basically makes you feel good about yourself. She builds up your yeshus. If you have a good mother, that's what she's supposed to do, right? She's supposed to make you feel confident. Your father, even by inception, he's in and out of there, right? He leaves a seed and you never see him again, right? He's like this distant person. You could say, what does my father really have to do with me, right? He's not growing me. He's not strengthening my sense of self. He's out of the house. So what connection do I have with my roots, right? But on the contrary, you're not going anywhere without the father. And on the contrary, this distant thing, his whole reason for being is Peru Ravu. Even though he's got much less direct connection with the fruits, he's only there to make fruits, right? And so it is in the Chokhmah and Bina. If this is the mother and the father, think about the Chokhmah and the Bina. You have parts of your brain, Bina, that's there to develop you, that's there to make you grow and make you bigger, right? And essentially bolster your yeshus. And there's nothing wrong with this. In fact, yeshiva is a little bit like this, right? Because we're trying to build you into something, right? But ultimately, we're going to see in the next paragraph, that in and of itself, that comes with certain problems. What's the Indian of the seichel of the chokhmah, right? It's basically a type of intelligence which is not there to foster you and make you understand to become wiser and more of a metzias. It's there when you're meditating on things which negate your metzias. Like, for example, meditating on the Or Ein Sof. Right? How do you feel when the Or Ein Sof is shining in full? Noam. You don't feel. You don't feel anything because what's in the place where you would be is the Or Ein Sof. Right? The Chokhmah is basically an aperture which brings into something which negates everything's metzias. So how does that build you up? It doesn't build you up. It makes you into nothing. So this is the idea of meditating on ideas where you're not the subject of the conversation. That's the difference between Ish and Adam in a very basic sense. The Ish of the Seichel is there to figure yourself out, which is very important. You're going to go to your psychiatrist and you're going to say, why am I like this and why am I like this? How can I be better? And you can improve yourself and improve yourself and improve yourself. Very important. But then you're going to go to Chassidus class and you're going to talk about realms of existence where you don't exist. It's not about building yourself up. It's about realizing that you're nothing, right? So this what does this do to you? You might think, I might be in some philosophical, like Disney World over there, but this is not helping me as a person. It is. The whole place of that is the roots are the basis and the foundation of these fruits. If you don't have that aspect of yourself, your mothering situation is going to lead to negativity, right? If you just focus on your own development and not your negation of your development, you're not a healthy fruit. So this whole idea of being abstract and sort of leaving the attention off of you is in fact also for you. Right? It's the foundation of you, in fact. It's your father. If without that, you wouldn't be here at all. Right? Even though in a revealed way, he's out the door and you don't see him. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, so let's take a look at how the Rebbe breaks this down with our 8 minutes. Os Vav. Hachidish shebahashpa ala midos mitzad etzem haseichel. What this essence of your intellect, what's the chiddush that it gives you? What does it do for your midos? Al hashpa ala midos mitzad seichel shayach lo midos. And how is that preferable to the influence of your intellect, which is developing your midos, right? So how is the father like giving a special influence that the mother doesn't give, in my words? So he says, Hu b'shnei devari. It's 2 ways that this Adam of your seichel improves you. Aleph, seichel hashayach lemidos, any intellect which is relevant to producing emotions, the bina, kevan shabo yesh tefisus makam lemidos, since in it there's what's called a tefisas makum lemidos. Someone have to describe that word for me. Define. Tefisas makum.
It makes space.
Taking up the space of the
Good. You guys both said the same thing, right? That essentially, as far as the meditation of Bina is concerned, it has room for love and fear, right? In it, it's already sort of assuming that there's this person there that's going to be creating midos. And therefore, alulos lalim al ora seichel. And therefore, this tefisas makom, in other words, let me put it another way. Let me try and put this in a slightly different way. I'm going to change the conversation a little drop, right? Just because it helps me to think abstractly. Too much Chassidus, I guess. But you have what we call, let's take, for example, in the mashal that we just gave, the ayin of the Yesh Amiti versus the ayin of the Yesh Hanivra. You have the Orein Sof versus the Kav. If, let's assume that these 2 things are in fact the Bina and the Chokhmah, right? Which is the Bina, the Kav. So the Bina is basically a light which is there to create the worlds, and it's a light which is shining light into creation. And if I'm a created being and I want to negate myself to God, right? What's going to happen if I try to negate myself merely to the Kav, right? The Kav has its whole existence is in order to contract itself in order to make me. And therefore, if I'm going to negate myself to this level of divinity, whose whole construction is there in order to make me, no matter how negated I get, I'm only negating myself to something which already recognizes my existence. Because the function of the Kav is to minimize godliness in order to take creation into account. So to creation will have what we call a tefisas makom. It will take up space and have some consideration. Let's call it tefisas makom consideration. That the Kav considers the reality of creation, because that's why Hashem siphoned off a Kav, because he wants to make a creation, and the big light is too much. So here I am in the created world, I want to be one with God. So if I set my sights on being one with the Kav, no matter how bittul I get, let's say I bittul myself 100% to the Kav, I'm still a yesh. Because my source that I'm bittling myself to is coddling me and holding me in its womb and making me feel important, because its whole design was to make me have a feeling of self. So I never actually get out of my essential being of self if I'm negating myself to something which considers my very self. And so it is with the mind of Bina, which is designed to create emotions. However refined my emotions will be, they're never going to become negated to the point of totally being one with Hashem, because the mind which is producing them, which is what they're negating themselves to, is recognizing their independence. In the state of the meditation on my emotions, right? They're not letting my emotions get to a state of complete and utter nullity, because the very mind which is producing and trying to gain that nullity is continuously hovering over them and making them maintain their presence. You getting that, Yitzchak? Yeah?
We talked about this before.
We have.
There's like a top
In truth, we've talked about all this before. Every page we've had now, we talked about before. It's just, do we understand it?
Wait, but even if you're bittling yourself to the Yesh Hamiti,
No, that's different.
no, I'm saying, even if you are higher than the Kav, you're still bittling
No,
yourself
then,
to yourself.
no.
Because everything's God.
Okay, but that's already, you're going to a place where even forget to the Yesh Amiti, get to the ayin of the Yesh Amiti, you're going to bitter yourself to something which is not considering you.
Right.
Your father's busy working. He's not thinking about you and making your peanut butter jelly sandwich. Right? So you're bittering yourself to a place where when you get there, you don't exist in that place. And therefore that helps you to become an actual healthy human being, where it's at the end of the day not all about you. If you grow up 40 years old, you're living in your mother's house, you could be the most developed adolescent in the world, right? But at some point, in order to really feel, like that there's something beyond you, which is healthy for you to have that hashpah, you have to bitter yourself to a place which does not recognize you as the most important thing. So that's what we're saying. What's the problem? If you try and bitter yourself to this mind of Bina, since Bina has a tefisas makom, it has a consideration for the midos, therefore, alulim la'alim al ora seichel. Therefore, kasher yesh ba'adam timtum alev. It's possible that the light won't get in when, for example, you have what's called timtum alev, when your heart is not really open to suggestion at the moment. Ein ha'seichel yochol lashpia al midos. At that point, the seichel cannot get to the midos. Right? There's like a blockage, basically, that the emotions have like sort of a say that I'm not interested right now in listening to my mom, right? Because you recognize me as an independent entity, I recognize me as an independent entity, and I'm not open to the suggestion of being bittul. So because I'm dealing with a lower level of hashpah, there's an ability for the mushpa to block the hashpah. And he says in footnote 26, Yisera mizeh, what's furthermore, Mekevan shesechel hashayach lamidos einu mahafech es midosav, alu shiyate gam besichlo mitzad hashoched deteva midosav. That, this is my problem with this class, but we'll just finish with this footnote 26. He says, not only if you have timtum alev, your heart is blocked, it won't necessarily allow the refinement process of that meditation to come in, right? Furthermore, it could actually get to a situation that since the seichel is shaykh to the midos, in other words, that the seichel itself could be bribed by the midos, and not only do you not take the meditation which is trying to refine you, but because the meditation which is trying to refine you is you're trying to mother you, the son could actually have a negative influence on the mother, and you could make your intelligence crooked to basically be swayed by your bad midos. Not only does it block its ability to be moved by the intellect, it could actually sway the intellect to start to justify its own bad behavior. So this, you're in your therapist's office, you're trying to fix yourself, and all of a sudden you've convinced your therapist that all your neuroses are correct, and that he's going to give you like a pass on all your bad behavior, because yourself has been so successful in defending itself, it's actually overtaken the device of meditation that was intended to manipulate it. You follow me there? So there's a potential downside in the whole moach of bina, in the mind of the mother, in the mind of the ish, called ish, which is intended to affect the heart. It's a mouthful. This is a major, heavy-duty topic all of a sudden. I didn't mean to go so deep. Your first day. You okay? All right, so pass it on in, please.